Which Indian players impressed me the most? If we do not make champs, this is a failure. Techno is another one. Yeah.
Like they can make it to Masters Toronto. You don't need Indian representation. We need to hit playoffs with this.
Talking about global esports, Indian fans rejoice all around the world.
Do I think this is a roster that's going to go to internationals?
Specifically Indian talent. I believe in this team more than any team that they've put together before. I don't think you need Indian representation on the team. You're trying to make playoffs at the end of the year.
Players impressed me the most. Lightning Fast was really good. I've said this before, but he made it close to making it to trials. But I think there was a couple of players that were like good, that have like promise. They're just not quite ready. Like Vinka, I thought Vinka was really good. And part of the problem is like these guys, as much as they're trialing, like they do have to trial with higher ping. Like that's the reality. And you know, it'd be great if we could get everyone to low ping and everyone that kind of stuff. But I asked about your confidence because G was bottom for. You're saying we can expect GE and champs in interview. Yeah, I'll be. Yeah, so I'm confident because of how I've seen practice go. Like, I was confident in our ability to maybe make champs before practice. Like, if we played well, I thought we could make champs in APAC. Mostly because APAC is having a little turnover right now, and at the top of APAC, you know, there was maybe 5 or 6 teams that I thought had a real chance of making champs, and outside of those 5 or 6, as we saw last season, there was a considerable drop off after that. And so I thought I could get our team into the mix of that 5 or 6. Now that I've seen us practice and I've seen us play, now I'll be disappointed. If we do not make champs, this is a failure to me. With the talent that we have on this team, with how well we're currently playing, if we don't make champs, it's a failure to me. Techno is another one. Yes, Pratham. Techno is another of the Indian players that I thought was actually pretty impressive. Actually, Techno was probably, I would say Lightning Fast first, Techno number 2, and number 3 for me would be Venka. Those would be the 3 that impressed me the most throughout trials.
All right. So first we obviously have kickoff. I'll be honest. I don't know if they make it to Masters Bangkok. But I feel like they can make it to the second Masters, which is Toronto. I feel like they can make it to Masters Toronto. That we have a 3-man Filipino core, which I feel like is going to be very helpful. Kelly, Papi, and Patrick, I think, form a very good Filipino core that, you know, makes the team very strong. So I feel like that will actually make the team more comfortable, because we have a one nation core. I don't care if it is you know, not an Indian core. Isn't G an Indian esports org? Yes, it is. Yes. Where is Indian representation? You don't need Indian representation because, okay, let me put it this way. You want GE as an org, as an Indian org to win, or do you want GE just to win by having an Indian player? That is the question. Because if the Indian players were good enough, I am telling you 100% they would be here. When it comes to the time of competing against some of these top players, you can't look away from when you've got a talent like Patrick, when you've got an experienced player like Papi, who at his age as well is one of the most clutch players there is. Somebody like Kelly S again, and you're gonna tell me that if you have a chance to pick up Crystal, who is a VCT China Ascension winner, you're not gonna pick him up. Esports is one place where you'll never be stopped, no matter what happens. Esports is one place where nepotism, I'm not talking about our region, I'm talking about worldwide. Esports mein nepotism does not work on in-game. In-game, it does not work. Why? Because if you are skilled, there will always be a team ready to pick you up. It doesn't have to be G, it doesn't have to be any other team. No matter which team, out of the 48 teams in VCT right now, one of them will pick you up. How many top 20 players on Indian leaderboard have played for G? Like I said, like even Rushi sir said, Techno, Deathmaker, Venka, Lightning Fast, all of these guys were there in the tryouts. All of them were there. If they were good enough to be at the top, they were good enough to make it through multiple rounds. I'm not saying they're not good, guys. They are really good. They just don't have enough exposure to the other side of competition. Man, if they were going to be there, they would have been there. I think they have to hit playoffs with this. Playoffs minimum. We need to hit playoffs with this. I just want playoffs. I want them to make playoffs. I want them to play in playoffs. I just want to somehow fight to make it a champion. Somehow. Finish 4th and somehow make it a champions. But
Global Esports, they're a team.
Are we talking about global esports? Indian fans rejoice all around the
Wait,
world.
actually speaking about
Hello,
GE,
India.
You already mentioned that Crystal got plucked out of Ascension. I mean, he's on the team.
But he's not calling.
If this opens him up as a fragger, I think that that's totally fine. Like, if he's
Already
just doing
was, I
side
think.
calling stuff and then
Yeah.
is just going to be pounding like he typically does anyway, then that seems great for them. But I could see this being one of those things where it's like, you know, maybe it's a little bit of a rough start to the season or something if it does occur. And then it's just like, okay, Crystal, actually, you're going to call. And then maybe there's a resurgence if it comes down to that. But after seeing the video, I think that I started kind of seeing the total vision of the roster. And I do kind of like it. I think it's a roster that can do damage. Do I think this is a roster that's going to go to internationals? No, I do not.
Starting from the coach that's been brought in, right? They've got a better coach than they've ever had in terms of having proven success and more experience. No hate to the prior coaches on GE. They had a really tough job to do, trying to balance the goals of the organization, which is to try to represent some level of like South Asian, specifically Indian talent. And then Juv3nile's got more experience, wants to be a head coach, worked with Leviathan, was crucial to them improving after they got rid of Goked as well. Went on the run towards top 4 of champions, got a ton of experience and has a vision of what he wants to do with the roster and is apparently pretty happy with the people that he's got together. I just looked at the Philippines split 2 that happened recently. Sort by rating, all 3 of these players are at the top. So like, I don't know whether that was just, you know, where part of the surge began and it just, these guys continue to perform really well as a team together, because they weren't together. This isn't a pre-existing core, but they all played in the same like circuit. Kelly S is going to be the IGL. Juv3nile's talked about the fact that he likes the like slightly micromanagey style that Kelly S has, but they seem like they've got some set roles here, some big fraggers, and I believe in this team more than any team that they've put together before, and I think that they don't need. Maybe I'm off the beat here. I'm not speaking for the Indian scene, obviously, but I don't think you need Indian representation on the team. I think at this point, the fans want a roster that's going to do something. I think what pissed off the fans before was, if you're going to have a roster that doesn't do anything, why not have some Indian representation on the team? This roster, I think, is designed to make playoffs. I'm looking at this and thinking, you're trying to make playoffs at the end of the year.
If this roster can do it, if they can come together and like the synergy is there with these players, like I rate a lot of these players incredibly well. Like they did an open trials system and went through, and you know, I can't even imagine how many players they went through to kind of come down to this roster. But this is what they've kind of assessed as the best of the best that they could get. Okay, I see the individual pieces, and I think that there's a ton of talent on this team. I just need to see it like really mesh.
Like, I'm feeling like they could fight for playoffs is because I agree with you that it's fairly stacked, like in terms of competition this year, but I don't see this roster as being objectively worse or having a worse chance than like the bottom 4 or 5 teams. Of course, that means it's a bit of a crapshoot. Like, whoever ends up performing better out of those 4 or 5 teams is going to make it. I'm not saying the global is, but I think they've got a good a chance of as any compared to like DFM, RRQ, Boom, these kind of rosters of being able to overtake those and be able to, you know, try to sneak into a playoff spot towards the end of the year.
I don't know. I agree. I think like a playoffs, like if you were gonna judge them now, like a 5th, 6th with like upset potential is doable. I was tempted for the member question to put them in there because I was like, actually, like if everything went right and these kind of tier 2 players performed similar to how we've seen like Madder and Verno perform, like where it doesn't seem like there's much of a difference between a lot of the top 2 tier 2 teams and tier 1, then they should actually have a pretty good go at it. So I agree. I'm on board, and this is the most hope I've had for just this org as a team. I think this is the best they've built, like from the get-go.
At the moment, if I had to power rank the teams, knowing very little because we haven't seen very much data,
Yeah.
I think I'd put them at like 9th, something like that. So they'd have to maybe a bit overperform my expectations, of which, you know, I could be vastly wrong. But the idea that it's the best global esports roster, the one with the most potential, let's say maybe, and yet their fan base could still have the same situation again, where they're playing actually quite decent Valorant maybe, and they're hitting some better shots than they ever were, and maybe they would have beaten the piss out of the previous esports global esports rosters, but that might not necessarily translate into, you know, on paper success or them going somewhere. Right. And I think that would just create, again, further frustration.
I think I agree with the overall consensus that this looks like the best put together GE roster in quite some time.
Time slows down when it can get no worse. I can feel it running out on me. I don't want these to be my last words. All forgotten, 'cause that's all that